Hello everyone, I hope you're doing well. My objective today is to review the basics of marketing as it can be used for a business, a small business, a large business, as you're looking at it from the entrepreneurship perspective. This also can be used for the review of the quiz or for this overall understanding of what is marketing. I'm not going to go in great details. I'm going to really very much go overview over the slides that I've provided. So I discussed the different perspective of what is entrepreneurship. Obviously, there's more than one perspective, depending if you're in finance, economics, or if you're someone who's starting a business. There are different perspectives, there are different style of entrepreneurship. And so I discussed that by looking at it from the proactive, innovative, risk-taking, more risk, less risk perspective. Then I discussed the elements of an entrepreneur, the various personality traits that you can have as an entrepreneur. Obviously, when you start reading books about what it takes to be an entrepreneur, you realize that it takes a lot of different skills. And if anyone has all the skills, this person is probably Superman or Superwoman. And oftentimes, it's understanding and reading between the lines about all of these characteristics. Nobody has all of these characteristics or is not perfect at all of these characteristics, but it's important to understand that some of these characteristics do help entrepreneurship. And if you don't have these characteristics, maybe you think about having a partner that would have those characteristics in order to compensate for yours characteristics not being very strong on those elements. I very much recommend to look at John Caldwell perspective that you can find a video on YouTube where he talks about a unique idea is very rare, and he talks about this effort and working very hard in order to get to the point. So this video is on YouTube. So what are your characteristics, and do you have any of these characteristics is where I would like you to think about after you get to that extent. So to be an entrepreneur is you can't do things randomly. Is you have to have some processes. You need to have this long-term vision and this short-term vision because you need to accomplish small things today in order to build up bigger things that you are working on. So here I discussed the different steps in order to analyze what you're doing, the various elements that are important in the different steps in order to move towards the creation of your business. There's also an element that I think is very important is the concept of attitude. Not being afraid of failure and constantly trying to be kind with yourself, but at the same time, demand that you learn from the past mistakes in order to make better decisions in the future. So you can't expect being perfect. You can't expect making no mistakes. You just try to make small mistakes so that way you can work at it. So what is marketing? Marketing is thinking about the customer. The customer is the center, and the center of the customer is its satisfaction. So you want to focus on the satisfaction of your customers. That way you can reduce the cost of getting customers because the one that you satisfy will keep coming back. And this is the smallest, easiest thing to do in order to build profit is having those recurrent customers because it costs many times more to create a new customers than to serve an existing customer. So this long-term view is what's going to build the growth of your business. Can marketing create needs? And the answer is it cannot create things. It can only create wants. So you help people serve their needs, satisfy their needs by coming up with innovation that will satisfy their needs better than your competitors or better than you satisfy the needs of the people before. Is marketing powerful? Yes, with marketing, you can change people's mind. You can even manipulate people and make them want something. And so that's what's very interesting about marketing. And as an entrepreneur, that's why marketing is the center of the activities of entrepreneurs. So what are needs? Needs is what you feel that you're missing, and want is what you feel is what you need in order to fill this gap of what's missing. And the domain is how much can you afford it? So business entrepreneurs, marketers, uh, uh, managers will be looking at the market and say, what is it that I need to change in order to make things better? And so this is looking at this market, looking at what you've done in the past, looking at what you're capable, looking at what your competitors are doing. And the idea is to find an opportunity to grow your business. Where do you look? What's the main source? The main source is the marketing environment, which is made of the micro and macro environment. The micro is the one that is directly surrounding the company, and the macro is the one that is indirectly affecting positively or negatively the company. Each one of these variables is a source that can generate an opportunity or a threat. So what is this concept of opportunity and threat? Well, you have internal factors and external factors. The internal factor is the strengths and weaknesses. Strengths is what you're good at. Weaknesses is what the company is not good at. And opportunities and threats are external, so the company has nothing to do with it. Opportunities are just straight facts that are talking about changes in the environment that you can take advantage of, versus the threats are the changing issues and matters and subject topics that will be giving you some trouble and that you can anticipate and you want to think about earlier, so that way you can start defining some strategies and tactics in order to go around them. The PEST or the PESTLE analysis is your analysis of the environment. When you do your PESTLE, you will end up with a bunch of strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities and threats. And so that's the objective of the PESTLE. So first do the PESTLE and then do the SWOT. If we look at a company like Crocs, what was the opportunity? Well, the opportunity is people wanted comfortable shoes, shoes that are easy to wear, easy to take off. They float if that's where you were going to use it next to water. They could have all kinds of different designs. They would not be very expensive, and they would be easy to make because they will be using one component, which is just the rubber. So the need that they serve is people, convenience and easy comfort of a simple shoe. So where do you make decisions is the environment. What you do with the environment is you collect data. There are two types of data: secondary data, which is already existing data, and primary data is the data that you have to collect yourself. So when you're looking at creating a report, is you're looking at defining a business plan. But a business plan really does not exist in itself. It's a combination of multiple plans. For example, the marketing plan is one of the elements of the business plan. So the business plan is this recipient that does not exist, but it exists because of the combination of existing plans that each one of them are very important. So when you have a business, you want to have at least one page in your business plan for each one of the activities. You don't want to omit any of the activities, because that will become sort of your weakness or your Achilles heel by having forgotten to look at the legal plan, or maybe looking at a weak budget, or maybe you're not talking about the HR, or maybe you haven't thought of the production. Anytime you write a business plan which is missing one of the existing hardcore plan, they're taking a chance to make a mistake. What does a business need the most? A business needs the most maybe money. Well, it does need money, but maybe that's not the most. Market research, well, if you have market research, you make better decisions. Help, well, there's always help needed. Time, yes, but really you don't want to take too much time at the same time, and you don't want to rush it. And a solid business plan as E. Well, the answer is E, is because the business plan will be discussing about the money, the market research, who you're going to need, and the schedule of the activity. So a business plan encompasses and covers all of these different activities. So what is primary research? Primary research is collecting the data yourself. You have two methods, qualitative and quantitative. Qualitative is you directly speaking to the customers and you're doing interviews and focus groups, versus quantitative is you're going to be collecting large amount of data where the purpose is to look at the frequencies as one of the objectives. And here you use the survey method, for example, which is the most common. Qualitative research, the idea is to identify the reason why people make the certain decisions. So you focusing more on the why, on the explanation in the qualitative. You're not really focusing on the statistical significance, versus in the quantitative, because you're not so much focusing on the why, but you're focusing on the answers to the how and when and what, mostly by looking at the statistical reliability of the answers. So research can be summarized in 3 steps. Exploratory research is you're looking at primary data that you're collecting yourself through those qualitative research. But first, looking at secondary data, the data that is available and easy accessible, maybe from free databases that you can find nowadays from the internet, or maybe you have access to a database that your organization is paying for. You're looking at this existing data and you're not satisfied because it's too old or it's not exactly what you're looking for, then you want to do more of this qualitative research, looking for the data yourself, but you find that this is not reliable enough, and then you want to increase reliability. Because you want to increase reliability, then you're looking at descriptive research, which in this situation is the looking at how much of this is true, what I found inside my exploratory research. And then causal research is to look at cause and effect through experiments. So how do consumers make decisions? Well, they make decisions through the process, which is the black box, where they are realizing and searching and processing the information. But what do they process? Well, they process information that they're getting from the brands, such as the price and how much how much benefits they're going to get, where they're going to get it, and who are using the products, for example. They're also using the fact that they're getting information from other people, not just from the brand. They're getting information from their peers, from their family, from indirectly from other people that they are connecting with through maybe social medias and so forth. Next, once they process this information, they buy the product or they decide not to buy. If they buy, then they eventually figure out if they are satisfied. If they're satisfied, they may recommend to someone else and then become themselves an input and influence the processing stage of other consumers and then buy again, or maybe they are dissatisfied and they don't do anything, or they tell other people how much they're dissatisfied not to recommend the product. What are the factors that are mostly influencing consumers? Well, there's the culture, the social elements, the personal individual element, and the psychological elements. All of these are different criteria that are very important to understand and understand the weight, where the cultural impact is the higher, biggest weight over consumers. But also it's important to understand all of these different elements because that's what you may be using in order to differentiate the customers. When you differentiate the customers, you also look at their needs and which level of need are they trying to fulfill by buying the product. The easiest, most basic one is physiological and safety needs. They're consuming a product because they need it from the fact that they need to drink and eat and feel secure. But also sometimes they're buying a product because they want to be like everybody else. That's the social needs. Sometimes they want to be differentiated from everybody else, and that's the ego needs. And sometimes has nothing to do with anyone or their physiological needs. It has to do with their own personal self-concept, where they want to feel that good about what they're doing. Maybe learning is not always to accomplish something, but is to feel better of yourself. The just noticeable difference is an element which is very important. When you have identified an opportunity, you're looking at what is it I should be doing in this market in order to be better? What is this one thing, 1%, 2%, just noticeable difference that I want to put in the product? It's also called the cherry on top. It's this idea that something that you're changing is going to make the product better. So maybe you selling wine and suddenly you decide to sell wine in a can, and this container becomes the just noticeable difference because some people will find it more convenient. So J&D is very important. If your J&D is too small, people will not buy the product. And sometimes you see this between different versions of the product because the product is not different enough. So maybe there's not enough differences between the iPhone 10 and the iPhone 11 for some people. Maybe they will wait for the 13 and 14 before they buy the iPhone because they need more just noticeable differences. What's important is to understand that people make decisions. They make decisions based on the fact that they recognize that they have some missing, something is missing, and so that becomes the need recognition. So maybe they want to lose weight, so then they're going to be looking for a product that they will feel is better as a diet product. Or maybe they have a punctured tire and now they really need to find a new tire. And so that need recognition is very important because it's going to generate the ambition, it's going to generate the willingness to be looking for the product and the intensity that they're going to use in looking for this product. So if they're not ready to buy the product, they won't look for as much information. But if it's something that they really need to find information, they will be searching for information. Obviously, depending on the product, if it's expensive, not expensive, they will look for more or less information. Then once they find different alternatives, they sometimes look for one, because it's an impulsive purchase, or sometimes they look for multiple. Obviously, the bigger the risk in making the wrong purchase, the more they will look for alternatives. Then they buy the product, and eventually they will be thinking about, am I satisfied? Do I want to buy another one? Do I want to buy something different? That's the simple explanation of the buyer decision process. People are not all the same, and they have different interests in what they buy because they have different affinity with the different product categories. Some people may be very interested in skis, buying skis, and every year they buy new skis. Whereas some people, they will be skiing with the same skis for the next 30 years because they're not too interested in buying new products. So there are different interests for different products, but there's also different personality traits where there's some people that always buy what's newer and some people that don't do that. So here what's important is to look at this different group of people and how they diffuse themselves in the purchase decision making, knowing that the innovators are very important because they initiate the purchases, but they're not the most important. If you could say which one is the most important, it would be the early adopters, because they are the one that really create the cycle of growth. So the innovators are necessary, but the early adopters is what really fuel this growth. When you're looking at marketing, the most complicated, most important concept beside opportunity and just noticeable difference is STP, segmentation, targeting, and positioning. So STP should be done in this direction, which is segmentation is dividing customers, targeting is selecting the different divided customers, and positioning is the image, the meaning that you will give to your brand in order to attract the target that you've selected. So how do you divide the customers? You divide the customers with the same characteristics that I described before: cultural, social, personality traits, and psychological. And all of these are your ways of dividing them. What's very important is you want to make sure that your segments are measurable, which means that there's a certain number and you know if it's small or big. Accessible means that you know where they are. Substantial, meaning that they're not too small, because the more you segment your market, the smaller the segments, and the more precise you become, but then you become smaller and smaller, and maybe it's not so attractive. Differential is obviously you don't want to be focusing on a group that is not that different and thinking is very different. So make sure that they are very different to the point that they will respond to the product that you're creating. And actionable, it goes back to the concept of the decision process, whereas the people are ready to buy, they're interested to buy. When you start looking at these targets and you decide who you're going to go after, if you go after all the targets and you don't differentiate the targets, it's called undifferentiated. If you decide to group some targets together because you think there's not enough difference between the targets and you want to keep a measurable, sizable, larger group, is you combine targets. So that's called concentrated. And then if you want to focus on specific targets with a specific product, it's called differentiated. If you're a small business, you're very much better off going after specific targets, because that's how you can differentiate your small business against your big competitors. So this is good. However, it's very expensive because you need to have one product for one target. So oftentimes, bigger business can afford this, but bigger business, they become less and less specific to the product and more generic. So that's why they tend to choose the concentrated marketing strategies. Obviously, all of this depends on the product that you sell and the level of competitiveness that you have in your market. Positioning is probably the most complicated concept in marketing. It's this idea, it's not so complicated to explain, it's more complicated to operate. So to explain is a brand has an image, a brand has an identity, so the positioning is the definition of that identity. So it's a definition compared to the focus of your brand, the type of target consumers that you're focusing on, and the type of competitors and market that you live in. So you have to take multiple consideration in order to create your positioning. And that's what's very difficult, is looking at all of the parameters in order to develop your positioning is complicated, and finding the one that is really meaningful. And the word here is salient, which means it's differentiating and it's giving the consumers a unique reason for them to be buying your product. So if we look at a map, perception map is the map as defined by the consumers. The consumers will be given a number of brands, and they will be giving a number of attributes of the map, and then they will be putting those brands based on the attributes. If they're more on the attributes of sportiness, more of the attribute of conservatism, if this car is, let's say, more of a prestige versus more of a practical car. And then they put the brand where they think it belongs. So the perception map is the most important one because it's the perception from the consumer perspective. If it's the positioning map from the marketer perspective, it's called positioning map, and that's what the marketers would want their brand to be. But then they need to do a number of actions in order to be perceived like this by the consumer. So you need to do both map, positioning map, perception map. They're both looking at positioning, but from the perspective of the marketer versus of the consumers. Now, this slide just summarizes everything I said. And this slide is the same thing, and it gives examples of different targets and using different characteristics in order to explain these methods. One thing that I find very important in business, and I mentioned this earlier, is the attitude. So your attitude should be an attitude where you are in the position of a learner. So the position of a learner is that you give attributes of your successes to your work, and you give attributes of your failure to your work as well. So the more you work, the more you perceive that you will be successful. So internal attribution is this idea is that you relate all the things that happens around you to your acts, versus external attribution is you relate all the things that happens to you to others. So if you succeed, it's because you had others maybe helping you. If you fail, it's because others were not helping you. The more you have an external attribution, the less control you have over your destiny. And so the more control you have over your destiny, the better it is. And this is why I recommend the Kobe Bryant video, which is called Winners Don't Make Excuses, because making excuses is therefore not talking about what you could have been doing yourself, is there's no excuses. If you won, it's because you've made the work, and if you lost, it's because you didn't make the work. And that's very, very important, because in business, it's, I remember when I started learning English, they would have this sentence that says, the buck stops here. And so it's your responsibility to make it successful, and it's your responsibility to identify why things are not successful, and therefore to remedy to these by coming up with a new methods, operation, execution, in order to make it successful. So when we talk about this operation, we're talking about the strategies. What are your strategies? Are you doing the strategy of hoping for the best luck? So the strategies are those high-level directions that you will be making, versus the tactic are the lower level directions. The tactic feeds inside the strategies. So when you analyze your strategies, you first look at what product do I have and how much do they help the business contribute to its growth. And so there are different products. Some contribute to the growth because they are within a trend and they are in a situation of trendiness. And sometimes they also contribute to your business because you're one of the dominating seller in this product category. So it's important to look at your matrix, the Boston Consulting Group, BCG matrix, in order to look at where is your product fits. But there's another matrix called the GE matrix. And so I recommend to look at this GE matrix. Benchmarking is analyzing your competitors by looking at their strengths and weaknesses, by looking at their strategies, by looking at their positioning, by looking at the type of customers that they go after, the type of resources, the type of research that they do. So everything your competitors are doing, you should be knowing about it and seeing how much you could apply to your business, and that would be called benchmarking. The difficulty is to separate what is a strategy and what is a tactic. So oftentimes I use those little Russian dolls to explain this. It's because they are folders and subfolders and sub-subfolders and sub-sub-subfolders. And so the big folder is the strategy and all the different things that you need to do in order to accomplish the strategy. So you define a strategy for a year, and you define it on the 1st of January, and then on the 31st of December, you look at if you achieve the strategies. But everything that you do every day, these will be the tactics. So the big idea, which is not achieved in one day, it's achieved in 1 year, is the strategy, and everything that you do in between will be the tactics. And so one feed into the other. So example of strategies, and the most common one, are the generic and soft strategies: market penetration, product development, market development, diversification. But you also have the basic competitive strategies by having the cheapest product, that's overall cost leadership, focus, you focus on a specific customer, a segment, a target. You're very differentiated in this situation. And then you have differentiation, which is also a strategy where you try to be very different. And it's this difference that you're cultivating. So it's more of a product orientation versus a customer orientation. And then the middle of the road is you trying to be not two different products and not for two very specific customers. But you also have operational excellence, where you're going to try to be the best product as possible. Customer intimacy, where you'll be closer to your customers. Product leadership, you will have the best product. And other last 4 strategies, it's market leader, is you will try to be the most sold, the most distributed, the most available, the most promoted. Market challenger is a strategy that consists in really trying to emulate the market leader. The market follower is the one that follows the challenger and the leader. And then the market nicher is sort of the same as what I discussed before when I called about the focus strategy. It's called also the nicher. The idea is that you cannot have one product that succeed and expect this to be forever. If you have one product that succeeds, and if it's the only product that you have, you've been obviously either very organized and you've done your research, or you got very lucky. But luck doesn't run very long, because you need to have an innovation and research and development and reinvest in having more products. And the idea behind this is that new products need to be launched. You don't want to launch too many products at the same time, usually, unless you have the means and you're like a multinational with hundreds of millions of dollars. Normally, what you do is you try to have a few, not too many, but just you can't count on just one. So you have one on two and maybe three, and one works and supports the growth of the future product. So it's sort of a spillover effect where you want to have enough products going and being launched in order to grow. The idea is, again, talking about the different group of customers, this is the same slide as we've seen before, is you will have different customers that will be buying the product, and therefore you will want these different customers to play their role, because there's a product life cycle. So the product life cycle is, the idea is that there are 4 stages where the product is going to go through. Sometimes the product don't go through the 4 stages at the same speed. There may be a product that's really in a growth stage for a very long time, and some products that are in the maturity stage for a very short time. So not all the products go through the same amount of time. You could not give a percent. It's 10, 25, 25, and the remainers, it's different, going to be different percentage of the time that they're going to spend, depending again on how many competitors you have. Because of this, you have the same problem with the amount of profit and the amount of market share that you have. And essentially, that's what you're trying to do, is you're trying to get as much growth as possible, then you try to have as much market share as possible, and then you try to have as much profit as possible. And eventually, you try to phase out the product, but you're doing that because you have a replacement. So maybe when you start the decline stage, you have a similar product which is in the introduction stage, and so that way you can keep recycling and having a business that keeps growing. One of the most important strategy in marketing and in business is creating new product. So creating new product is critical, because innovation is one of the main reasons why a business can be successful, is because they're coming up with something new that is better. Again, creating the just noticeable difference. But there's a process behind this, and there's essentially 8 stages to summarize the different stages of the new product development. So it's important to understand those 8 stages. Now, as an overall understanding of what is marketing, marketing is satisfying the customer, but marketing is also working on your 4 Ps. So the P of product is what you're going to sell. The P of price is how much are you going to sell it. The P of place is where you're going to sell it. And the P of promotion is how you're going to communicate about it. So what is the product? Is anything that can be sold. Anything that can be sold that it doesn't have to be a product such as a physical object. A product is a generic term where you have goods, physical objects, but you also have services, which are intangible, and you have events, persons, places, organization, IDs, and then combination of the above. When you talk about the marketing mix, or the 4 Ps, you talk about the P I just mentioned, but in the product, you also have a product mix. So the product mix is different elements that you need to look at when developing a product. There are different levels of the product. You have the core product, so it's the main benefits what you sell the product. So it's like a bicycle. The core product of a bicycle is exercise. Then you have the actual product, so that would be the different brands, the different feature of that bicycle, and then you would have the augmented product. So the augmented product is the 3rd layer, just like an onion, from the core to the other layers, and the other layers will be, for example, the financing, the delivery, the instructions how to use the product, the after-sales services. So all of these are important, but in different layers. When you're looking at managing your product, you're looking at the product portfolio, and you're looking at the mix in terms of, does it have many variations? Does it have variations that are more expensive, more affordable? And you're looking at this, and if you have many affordable products, you may be thinking of making more fancy products, more luxurious products eventually. Or if you have very luxurious products, you may be considering make simpler versions. And so this constant stretching that you're doing is very important, and that's what you do in the product portfolio. So the upward stretching, the downward stretching, the extension of products, the variation of products is very important. And all of this should not be done for the sake of creating products, but for the sake of serving the satisfaction of the customers and increasing your just noticeable difference. based on real opportunities which you have identified through your research, which you had anticipated from writing a business plan that would be programming all of that. So all of this is very important. They should not be things that randomly happen because you just got lucky sometime, not lucky some other time. Not only are you selling products and you're selling those features, but people are also buying the more emotional part of the product, which is the brand. So the brand is very important, and sometimes they may be buying more of a brand than even a product. Because what is the difference between buying a product that has a feature such as uh, uh, the shoes made with rubber, all the shoes are made with rubber. What is the difference? Is suddenly you're thinking of the image, and therefore that's why the positioning is very important, and it's connected to this brand equity. Now, brand equity is the value of a branded product compared to a non-branded product because there is this assets and value behind it. First layer is called the brand awareness, is do I know it? The brand association is what are the attributes, what are the positioning elements, what is the images that I associate with the brand. The brand quality is what is my perspective on less quality or more quality. So that's the next higher level. And then the final level is the brand loyalty, is if that brand was to sell something, how much would I want to buy it? Because I like this brand so much, there's an increase of wanting to buy it just from the fact of the brand. I follow the brand and I trust everything that the brand does. In fact, not only I buy it, even not knowing really what the product is about just based on the brand, but I tell all the people that's what also they should be doing. So branding strategies, there's 4 basic brand strategies, such as flankers, when you try to make as many products with many brands as possible because you want to gain the biggest market share. So you have like similar product, but with different brands. And so you are sort of gaining market share by sort of overwhelming the market with your brand. You see this when you go to a supermarket and you look at a shelf, and then you find out that most of those products are made by the same manufacturer. They're just different brands, and that's how they get to have so many products on the shelf, and therefore increase the likelihood of selling a product. If you have one brand, one product, you take this much space. But if you create another product with a different brand and a different brand, and essentially people don't realize they could be buying the same thing, but they just associate their interest with a different brand. Cash cow is when what you want it's related to the BCG matrix that is discussed earlier, is what you do is you're trying to buy the brand that everybody buys. It's the most sold one. It's the one that you sort of dominate. Maybe it's not the most popular product category, but it's the one that doesn't require as much work. The low entry, so the cheapest version, and then the highest version. There are several brand strategies. Here, I'm talking about the 4 main 1+1, which is the co-branding. So you're looking at line extension, brand extension, multi-brand, new brands, and co-branding as 5 of the strategies. Now we're going to look at the different pricing. So the idea behind pricing is you have fixed cost and variable cost, and that makes your total cost. The idea is that you have different pricing because of your economies of scales. So economies of scales is the more you buy a raw material, the cheaper the raw material, and therefore the cheaper the production of this product. So if you, I don't know, making cars and you're selling 1,000 cars, you are buying 4,000 tires. But if you're selling 2,000 cars, you're buying 8,000 tires. And those 8,000 purchase will make the tire cheaper than if you bought 4,000 or if you bought 400 or if you bought 40. Obviously, the more you purchase from your suppliers, the lower the prices, and the more you are able to sell the products either less or to make a higher profit. The experience curve is the fact that the more you're working on one type of product, the better you become at controlling the production of that one type of product. And the more new types of product you had, the more you're going to have to build this experience curve in order to improve the quality of your product. So the experience curve is very important because it's very difficult to be a man of all trades, and it's much better to be a man of one trade in the sense that you will be really mastering this trade and therefore having the experience curve. But sometimes the positioning or the demand in the market is for you to have multiple trades. So there's no one rule that works all the time and applies to everybody. What's important is to understand the concept and see how it applies to your market, how it applies to your strategy and your tactics. So that's why the experience curve is good. So when you set prices, obviously, you would want to try to have the price as high as possible as a seller, and as a buyer, you would want to have the lowest price as possible. So you're going to have to define, am I towards the high or towards the low? Well, there are four strategies for this. The first one is the cost-based pricing strategy, which is how much does it cost, and add a percentage. So it costs $10, I'm going to add 10%, so I'm going to sell it $11. This one is the easiest one. The break-even pricing is, so the one we just discussed, the cost-based pricing, is more of an accounting perspective versus the break-even pricing is more of a finance. The idea here is that you want to know how, you want to make a certain amount of money. So this is what the one that's most common when you have investors. Maybe if you're looking at a show like Shark Tank, they would oftentimes refer to the investment as being worth or less worth, more worth, and so forth, based on this idea of break-even pricing. So someone is giving you $10,000, they want to have their $10,000 plus some money, and they want to know when. So what you have to look is how much does the product cost to the cost, plus how many you think you're going to sell, and therefore you're going to have to see how much money is returned from this number of sales, hypothetical sales, and then you start making some assumption of if we sell more, we'll be making more, and you start sort of drawing some kind of graph that shows that once you reach a certain amount of sales, you will reach the return on investment for the investors, and then your forecast is normally a sales above that, and that becomes the return on investment, which will be higher, and you will make different scenarios and show that the most plausible scenario is the one where they would make a certain percentage as a minimum chance, most likely would chance, and therefore that's how investors look at this, by seeing and evaluating the possibility that you make this money. So the break-even is a necessity requirement for knowing what to do. It's much more complicated than the cost-based pricing, but it's much more intelligent. And also, it's great for businesses to think about break-even, because oftentimes you will need investors. The value-based pricing is the one that is the most marketing-oriented, because you're thinking about not so much the cost of what you're selling, but you're thinking of what it's worth for the consumers. And so, for the consumers, it's like, should the consumer buy the product for the bare value, the bare benefit of the product? It's one price, but if they're buying it for what they hope the product does to them, it's very different. So if you're selling mineral water or just water, water is worth cents, like a penny, and therefore you should sell it for 3 pennies, because water is not free, but it's very inexpensive. Water for drinking, I mean, how much water you drink per day, if that's what you had to spend most of the time for most people, it would be extremely inexpensive. But if you're buying mineral water, it all depends. Obviously, if it's mineral water that is imported, it becomes much more expensive. Why would anyone drink imported mineral water? It's still water, and obviously that would be going from 2 cents to $2, and that makes a huge difference. And so there's a reason why people buy a drink and buy imported mineral water, is because there's a value-based pricing. And so different imported mineral water have different positioning and different images, and therefore they have different perceived value. Obviously, the value-based pricing is sort of the highest price that you can sell, versus the cost-based pricing is most likely the lowest price that you can sell, based on this 3 definition I just showed you. There's also the competition-based pricing, which is this idea that your competitors, they do exist, and they make a point, and you may have to be just a little bit more, or a little bit less, or a lot less than your competitors, depending again of the situation in your market. And so setting your price, maybe just looking at what the competitor prices are. So it's important to do cost-based pricing, I think, as a beginning, just to see if there is anything that you could be making from selling this product, but not just being stuck on this, because there may be a reason why people may want to spend much more, and therefore the value-based pricing makes sense. But then you may require to think about the return on investment, because obviously everybody's time has a value, and you may be trying to sell something else, because there's other things you could be selling to make money, and then the break even makes some sense at that time. So all of this is part of your research, and all of this should be determined before selling the product. And it should not be a luck or random situation. So pricing has also strategies, and there's two big ones: the market scheming and the market penetration pricing. So market scheming means trying to sell the product as high as possible because you have a high level of innovation and you don't have too many competitors. Why not? You're the only one and your product is better, you should do that. But the problem is your market share is not going to grow very fast, usually because it's still an expensive product. So it's only going to go for a smaller group of people and it's going to take more time to grow and to gain market share and to become the new product that everybody's going to look for. So you may choose to do market penetration. Market penetration is going to put it so low that most everyone is going to be able to afford. Most everyone is going to switch and buy your product, and then you're going to have the largest market share. And it's going to be difficult for your competitors to enter the market. But you won't have made as much money, and you've taken a risk as well that someone could undercut you and be even cheaper than you, and then you have the regret of not having sold it higher while you were the only one in the market. So there's pros and cons. You don't want to pick one randomly. Here again, it depends on your competitors and how much resources your competitors have, how much you control the distribution. There's many different characteristics. And so understanding what are the strategies is very important, but understanding the market is even more important to be choosing which one. Then there are all kinds of product derived type of pricing, such as the product line pricing, where you would have simpler version and more fancy version of the same product. You would have the optional product pricing, where you will be making money from the option, the captive product pricing, where you will be making more margins from the product that they need to have. So you're selling printers, and you will be making 10% on selling the printers, but you will be making 300% from selling the cartridges. So the cartridge is the captive product pricing because they have to have this type of products. But there are other pricing considerations, such as the different type of customers you're selling the product, the fact that people pay in cash, the people buying large quantities, the people are getting discount because the packaging is simpler or more fancy, the different time you sell the product. Maybe people are giving you their previous product and there's a trade-in allowance. And then there's different times of the year where you would have different prices. But again, who is buying makes a difference. You're selling to a student versus you're selling in the airport versus you're selling before Christmas versus you're selling after Christmas, and versus you're selling in a gift packaging versus you're selling into without packaging. All of that will have different pricing. Now, looking at promotional pricing, you're looking at various types of promotional pricing, and each one of these has an impact as well. Now, looking at the distribution, we have an important element of the mix, which is the P of place for distribution. And here we're looking at the different people who are involved in the distribution. There are different channels, there are different intermediaries. Obviously, distributing is expensive because if you're manufacturing the product, the consumer may need help in order to get the product. So there is a cost in doing this, and there's different formula. The easiest formula is to sell it directly to the customers. You manufacture, you sell to the customers. The other formula is use a retailer that is a third party or a retailer that you own. The next formula is before the retailer, you have a wholesaler. Maybe you own the retailer, but not the wholesaler, or maybe you own the wholesaler as a manufacturer, but you don't own the retailer. And the C is for the consumer. So direct distribution versus indirect distribution with different type of intermediaries. The J here is like a broker, is like a jobber, is someone that's going to play a role. So in this situation, is you could have a broker, like I mentioned, but you could also have different people that play a role. As the shipping company has also an importance because they still act for you to bring the product from manufacturing to the consumers. There are different channel function in distribution, which is, from collecting information, from advertising, communicating, from being in touch with the customers, the contacts, or the distributors, or the wholesalers, or the retailer, and so forth. You also, as a distributor, have to match. Not all your product will sell in every store. There are stores that are more appropriate. Maybe it has to do with the zip codes. There's some zip codes where people buy more a certain fruit than another, and therefore you know this in advance, and you will make sure that you have inventory appropriately based on the type of customers that that these people have in these various areas. You will be negotiating the purchase. You will be the one storing the product and moving the product. You will be maybe paying in advance some of the product. You will be taking some risk because there may be some new product that the manufacturer has made that you will be taking because you're representing. Maybe you have some contractual requirement in purchasing the new products and proposing the new product. So they're taking risk along the brand for carrying this product. So what are the decisions here? Again, as a distributor, you need to understand who are your customers, what you need to do to satisfy them, what would be your objectives. Look at the different way you will distribute the product. Some markets you may try to distribute everywhere, some markets you will be more selective, and some markets you will have to give some contractual territory sales representation. One of the most common strategy for distribution is to talk about the pull and push strategies. So pull strategies is you will be selling through the channel of distribution. So you try to give incentives to the wholesalers, to give incentive to the retailers, which is going to give incentive to the customers. So it's going in that direction where the incentives is pushing the channels to be buying the product, not the customer. Versus the push strategy is where you're pushing the customer. So what you do is you're directly communicating to the customers, and it's the customers that are seeking the product and eventually telling the retailer and wholesalers to carry the product. Obviously, the most powerful communication push and pull push strategy is the push strategy, where the consumers are the ones seeking the product. The consumer is the boss, and if the consumer wants the product, pretty much everybody is going to try to make it available to them. But it's oftentimes a complicated, expensive, long-term oriented strategies, which is becoming available to anyone through the social media. But the social media is such a busy area now, and sort of organized and controlled by the big companies, that it's becoming harder and harder, even using social media to go to the customers, but it's still possible. So the most common for small businesses is pull strategies. The most common for, or the most appropriate or easier to use for the big companies, the push. But the big companies, they use both push and pull, and small companies, what I was trying to say is that they use mostly the pull and then the social media in order to get seen by the customers. So visually, that's what you get. Push is this incentives through the channel of distribution, versus pull is making the customers want to buy it even directly to the manufacturer, and therefore making the channel work for the manufacturer. Obviously, the best combination is to have both with different level and different balances, but to get the most out of them. When you negotiate between manufacturers and distributors, the channel of distribution, the idea is everyone has some strengths and weaknesses. So the manufacturer, their strength is they control the quality of what they make, they have their brand reputation, they're making contribution and profit for the distributor, because the distributor is making money from having the best brands and products, and then they have consumers that are satisfied and keep buying from them. The distributor, it's their location, the fact that they have customers coming to them, the fact that they are a large buyer from the manufacturer. So if you're a manufacturer and you sell directly to customers, oftentimes you're going to sell one product, two products to the customers. But if you're selling to a distributor, you're going to be selling hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands to the distributor. So when you talk to a distributor, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. When you're talking to a customer, you're talking about $100. So if you were to dissatisfy someone, you better satisfying one customer than one distributor because of their volume of purchase. So that's very important. Consumer loyalty is the same thing. Is they have a brand and they are known by the consumer, and the consumer may have loyalty to that specific store. Now, when we talk about, again, the distribution and the places, we're obviously talking about retailing. Retailing is all the activities that involve selling goods and services directly to the customers, whereas wholesaling is all these activities trying to sell to a business, which business is going to be reselling the product or converting this product into something else in order to sell it. These wholesalers are very important, and they have pretty much all of the different characteristics that I mentioned just before for the characteristic of a distribution channel. What's interesting about the wholesaler is that you have the wholesaler that belongs to the manufacturer, or the wholesaler that belongs to the distribution network, And within the wholesaler, you have another group of people, which I mentioned before, which call the brokers or the agent or the jobber. These are very important in the sense that they pretty much always don't have any ownership or storage inventory of any of the product that they sell, but they act as an agent in between the various party. And it's an intermediary that is very important because their strength is their network. Who do they know? How many people know them? Who trusts them? Who comes to them to look for solution? And who listen to them when they come and give solutions? Brokers may be someone that has a direct access to a large retailer such as Walmart, Costco, and these people can directly speak to those large purchasers. And it is very difficult to get an appointment for a manufacturer to these large retailers. Oftentimes, they have 1 day, 2 days dedicated out of the year to be reviewing new products and reference them, and it's a long process. Versus a broker can get you in a much faster pace because those big buyers, they rely on the insight and of those people that are sort of hunters, free hunters that discover good things and bring them to them. It's very important for them to keep their eye open because they don't have the time to see everything and therefore they rely on it. So knowing good brokers is very good. Even becoming a broker is a very good business because oftentimes it doesn't take a lot of money. It takes a lot of stamina to build the business. So it's like a real estate broker is not something that happens overnight, but eventually, if you put the hours and if you are very connected in your community, eventually you become the source for people that want to sell houses or buy houses, and business happen much more organically from all the efforts that you've done before, with a big return on investment. But your biggest investment is your time, and there's nothing for sure to be successful when you're a broker. But if you put the time and effort, it usually goes around to become successful. So now the promotional mix is made, and that's the last one. It's called promotional mix, but it should be called the communication mix. But if it was called the communication mix, it would be called the 3 Ps and 1 C, and that would not be very easy to remember. So the last P is called promotion, and in fact, promotion is one element of the communication mix, which is sales promotion. So just reviewing them, the most obvious is advertising. So it's selling directly to customers and being recognized. Public relation is working on the different images and the different public views and working on any situation of crisis. So it's seen as non-commercial. It's almost like a journalistic. It's content creation. It's working closely with social media by creating all the visual effects, the videos, organizing trade shows, organizing meetings and so forth, events, creating the newsletters. All of this is public relations. Direct marketing is creating an offer and sending this offer to a database. So either by emailing the people, by phoning the people, by contacting them anyways with a specific offer that would be limited in time and very much directed to that specific group. So people that bought before but have not bought for a while, is you try to reactivate them, or people that are constantly buying, is you give them better offers to keep buying more. Sales promotion is creating an offer specifically, or again, that is just talking about a reduction, some reduction that will give people the opportunity to buy. So it's not directed to anyone specifically. It could be if you're using sales promotion inside direct marketing, but just sales promotion is 2 for the price of 1 on that specific evening or that specific month or something like that. Digital marketing is all the app designs and e-shopping and social media that you will create using the new technology through the phone or the internet in order to market to the customers. And personal selling is organizing a sales force that will be working on a certain territory with some objectives, some training, and some teamwork in order to achieve some sales. All of these 5 are essentially all of the components. But when you're looking at communication, you have 4 objectives of communication. One is to inform. So letting people know what it is and it exists and what does it do. The objective here is not to persuade them. The objective is just to let them know in order to familiarize them. Usually that's the first step. And the next step that comes afterwards is to give them a self-promotion or to give them a direct marketing. At that time, maybe he's looking at the advantage of the product, telling them that it's limited, telling them that there's a special promotion at a special time. So persuasive advertising, the objective is very much sales. So informing is making people know about it. Persuading is making them buy the product. Comparative advertising is when you realize that people may not think of your product as being as good as someone else. And therefore, then you try to talk about this someone else and talk about the advantages you have and the weaknesses that these products have. Or maybe you try to make people realize that you are the same as so and so. And so therefore, they start considering you as an alternative. Reminder advertising is if you keep doing informing and then persuading, and once they bought, you reach a certain level of sales and you reduce your communication, you will see your sales will reduce. So it's very difficult to precisely track the impact of communication on sales. But what everybody knows is that the more you communicate, the more you generate sales, and the less you communicate, the less you generate sales. And if you were to reduce your communication, you oftentimes see a reduction of your sales. Having said that, there could be an overload of communication to the point that too much communication can actually decrease sales, but the standard is that communicating more is usually better than communicating less. The reminder is therefore acknowledging this and constantly having a minimum amount of communication past the maximum communication that you have in order to sustain your brand in being known by your customers. This completes my review, and I wish you a good day. Bye-bye.